We gave our pitch. AutoZone sat in a huge conference room, 30 executives. The room was quiet. Everyone was waiting for the CEO to say something. And he said, boys, I just don't think people are ever going to buy auto parts online.
That's Brian Murphy, the CEO of Smartling. But before that, he grew a company to $2.5 billion in GMV before selling it to eBay. The company was WHI Solutions, and it was one of the first online auto parts catalogs. And
kept that very tight connection between the customer and what job they were trying to do and the development cycle that we had.
That all makes sense. But here's where a lot of founders mess up, starting with myself.
Unless that is specific and in line with the customer problem and measurable, I think it gets tough because it's
What were you obsessing over in those early days?
a customer's job that they want to get done. And it's remarkable to me how many times companies can kind of get lost in they're interested in. One of the things I always try and do is bring it back to, hey,
How are you actually talking to customers?
we brought in a bunch of mechanics, service dealers into our office there in White Plains and sat them down, had, kind of like have a dozen, coffee, donuts kind of thing, and just having a conversation, showing them some wireframes of what we were trying to do. Their reaction to that was just super powerful. The question I always ask, I just start out and say, hey,
I'm Adam O'Donnell. This is the Founder Initiative. Let's go.
I started my first company when I was 12 years old. It's a pie baking business. Taught me everything I needed to know about product market fit and gross margin. So I'm actually originally from Detroit. I was in the automotive business for several years, and I was my cousin and I had always we were best friends growing up, and we always wanted to start a business together. And he had gotten involved with the internet in early days, and one of the companies I'd started in Detroit was basically a web services firm, and we were kind of kicking around looking for big markets that could be disrupted. And I said, I'll tell you what, it's a really sort of antiquated business is auto parts distribution. And the more we talked about it, the more we felt that there was a really strong product opportunity here in and above the fact that the way that the traditional way of getting a part, if you needed a part, was you had to look up from this rack of paper catalogs, right? 2010 Chevy Avalanche 5.3-liter engine, I need this part, right? And this, stodgy old counterman would be like flipping through his pages on the phone if you could get them, etc. And then you only had inventory in the store of like maybe 12,000 parts. So it was a really bad user experience or customer experience. We thought, what if we put this online, we made the inventory virtual, and we created an electronic parts catalog so you could look it up the way you do now. And that was really the genesis of the idea.
Could you share any of the doubts that you had around that?
Oh God, we had so many doubts. So I'll give you a great story. So we went down to AutoZone, down to their Memphis headquarters, sat in a huge conference room. It was packed with like probably 30 executives, CEO, all his operating team. We gave our pitch because we wanted them to come online with us and sell, right, to be a seller. And finished our pitch, and the room was quiet. Everyone was waiting for the CEO to say something, and he said, boys, I just don't think people are ever going to buy auto parts online. And the entire room just kind of started laughing, nodding their heads going, this ain't never going to happen. And then, we just said, wow, that was pretty tough. And, what gave us confidence was going out to and talking with the actual customer, the users, and listening to their frustrations. And, I'll tell you what, they didn't always say, oh yeah, that's a great idea, but they were very clear in what their problems were. And so, one of the things I did early on was, think about the innovator's dilemma, reading the innovator's dilemma. And I love one of the lines of that. One of the keys of that is obsessing over a customer's job that they want to get done. I love to learn. I don't know that I come up with a lot of my own great ideas, but I love to stand on the shoulders of giants. And, Bezos famously has the empty chair in the room. I talk about that all the time. And it's remarkable to me how many times technology teams and companies can kind of get lost in their what they're interested in. And I think one of the things I always try and do is bring it back to, hey, what job is our customer trying to get done? What outcome do they want? And that's the key.
How would you frame the job for WHI?
Installer, I'm a service provider, I'm a mechanic, and I got a car up in the rack. I got a mom out in the lobby with a bunch of crying babies. You know what I mean? I need to get this job done. I need to get the parts that I need to get. So the previous modality was I would pick up the phone, I would call 3 different places, trying to get the part that I needed, having a conversation with a guy, flipping through the paper catalogs. If I could get him on the phone it was difficult, and then it just took time, and then did they have the part, did they have not the part? So, and it was only during business hours. So what we came up with was, as you might imagine, an online solution where at any time of the day, that person or someone in the office that was responsible for procuring parts could go online, find the part that they needed, look it up in the catalog within in less than 18 seconds. And they loved that concept. The funny thing about it is that the sellers, so the AutoZone guys had the perspective of being that counterman, what we call that person that would be flipping, like the seller. They hated it. Like they were like, oh no, I'm an expert. There's no way they can do my job. And what they're really worried about is having their job taken away from them. That's right. So you do have to be careful when you're talking to people in the industry. You do have to be careful who you're talking to and making sure you understand their motivations.
Is there a specific conversation when the light bulb really clicked for you? Like,
We were doing basically like a user panel, right? As part of our product development process, we brought in a bunch of mechanics, service dealers into our office there in White Plains, and sat them down, had kind of like have a dozen coffee donuts kind of thing, and just having a conversation, showing them some wireframes of what we were trying to do, and just like their reaction to that was just super powerful. They're like, "This would be awesome. In fact, but do this, do that, do the other thing," and we could tell that we had a dog that would hunt.
come and get some free donuts, or like, how did you
Yeah.
articulate that?
Yeah, well, this is kind of like early days of the internet, so they're all excited that someone was paying attention to them. You know what I mean? There's this tech company, they want us to come in and talk, and we love to do that. The other thing we did, we put together these we call those wrench heads, but we had like these. We put together. It's kind of like a customer advisory board in a way, but we made it way more fun. And oh my gosh, we used to have so much fun with these folks. Like they just really enjoyed the experience and being able to help other of their cohorts solving problems and talking about technology. Because once again, like it's funny, I always joke like mechanics are technical in nature. Okay, they just don't get the credit that's due, the big credits that due to them, but they're great problem solvers and quite innovative.
Could you give some examples of that kind of questioning process?
So Smartling, right? We do these dinners, right? So in every city, we'll do a different dinner. We're kind of like a rock band, but like not fun. Anyways, the question I always ask, I just start out with say, hey, what problem are you trying to solve? And that opens up a whole conversation, right? I try not to start with like, here's what we're doing. I'm just like, what's the biggest problem you're trying to solve right now?
Just
And
anything.
just anything. And they will oftentimes very naturally tell you the thing that they're worried about, right? And the problem that they're trying to solve. And for us at SmartLink, for example, so we help our customers are like IBM, Disney, Tesla, Verizon. We help them create multilingual experiences around the world that their customers will love. So we're dealing with marketing folks, product folks, engineering. They're creating multilingual software applications, web applications, websites, content, etc. And so the big problem they're trying to solve right now is that they've got this exponential growth in content that needs to be localized. And they're getting a lot of pressure from the C-suite to use AI, right? What's your AI strategy? And I'm doing the same thing with my teams, right? So like sales team, what's your AI strategy? Customer experience, what's your AI strategy? And so they're getting asked, these departments, what's your AI strategy for translation? And so that's really the big problem that we're focused on solving for them is great, we have a solution for you.
Great. What was your MVP for them, and how long was it after that panel?
Coffee and donuts were kind of like wireframe time, right? So here's the idea, and then we turned that into a working prototype, and then had him look at it again, give us feedback, and I tell you what, we felt like we were going fast back then, but the reality is like, if you remember back then, this was like, I mean, we had like you couldn't just like create a login to Shopify. I mean, we had to like build our own servers, fly people out to Microsoft because the databases weren't working correctly, all that kind of stuff. It's like so it was a lot slower than it is now, I feel like. But that was sort of like the kind of like build, test, repeat as fast as we could and get feedback on that. So I think it probably took us, it was like a period, it was definitely a period of months
Yeah.
to get to that point where now we had an MVP that we could go sell. It's wild. So we do 3,300 production releases a year at Smartly.
Wow.
So like what's that, like 11 a day? So like basically continuous development, but like creating like what are the pillars? What's the framework of the problem that our customers are trying to solve? And I try and turn that into like a metric in a sense. So for example, at Smartling, they value the outcomes they desire are quality, speed of turnaround, and cost and user experience. That's like kind of forth. But those are the four sort of pillars of the outcomes that they want. Okay. Once that's set, I can turn those into KPIs, which we do, and then that becomes the North Star for product and engineering. So it becomes this conversation every time, like, hey, this is what let's do a roadmap review. Here are the things that we're working on. I'm like, and now I don't have to do this as much, but in the beginning, I have to spend a lot more time going, okay, how's this specific thing? How is that going to drive quality, speed, or cost or user experience specifically? And what's your hypothesis on the impact on the KPI? Uh, so once again, you do that enough times, and now it's becoming ingrained. We have three buyers. We have a marketing person, we have a localization person, and we have an engineer. Those are the three type of product person. Those are the three type of people that really consume a lot of translation and localization in an enterprise. We tend to focus more on the first two, even though we're actually an engineering centric company. So we almost take them, I don't want to use the word for granted, but we do a little bit. And so we don't talk to them as well as we should. So that's one of the things, as an example of one of the things I'm working to change right now, if that makes sense.
That's interesting. It just closing that loop.
Sorry.
That, yeah, just closing the loop, the communication piece.
Yeah. So we to get it. So the product is like very engineering friendly. It does everything that it need, but we don't like from a Marcom perspective or from a customer communication perspective, we don't talk about it enough.
Got it.
And you know what's funny is like yeah, and it's funny because engineers speak very different than marketers, and we have marketers selling to marketers, right? And so the big thing is making sure that we've got marketers understanding how to talk to engineers in engineering language.
That is so interesting. This is a unique challenge that I don't think we had a couple years ago. So I really appreciate you servicing that.
No,
Um,
it's certainly is it's interesting.
that's really interesting. Yeah, then this is where like just I get excited about all the future startups that are going to be discovering and solving these new problems that are created as we all focus on building AI in our own products. Help us going back to product market fit. Is there something that was uncommon that you found that worked really well in your journey to product market fit? Let's just say with WHI.
Yeah, and I think actually just to close the loop because I want to
Yep.
close out the project. There is a solve here, which was actually really simple, which was I had my marketing people because we have engineers in the company, right? So I said,
Yeah.
write up your copy for this landing page, for example, okay, what you think it should be, and then give it to our engineering team. Once again, setting up that customer panel. They're the ones that have a job to do. The engineers have a job to do, and they have very specific requirements. Sorry, can you hold on one second?
Oh yeah, no problem.
Okay.
Take your time.
Sorry about that.
And oh,
Uh,
you're good. And just we can just pause for a second, Brian, and make sure that you feel. I know I've kind of been pulling us back. I was trying to like tie up that end, and so I think we kind of got. So that's on me. But I want to make sure that we get to close this point for you, which is around the way that you've gotten engineers and marketers to communicate better. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah, that's right. So for us, it was once again, the answer was, I mean, at first it seemed complicated. I'm like, how do I get my marketers to talk like engineers? And I'm like, actually, I just realized that I don't need to do, or the way to do that is the customer, in this case, are the engineers. So set them up in effect as a panel and create your product marketing content and have them review it and give you feedback on it. And that was like a really easy solution and had a huge impact. So once again, this just kind of goes back to like you got to understand who your customer is, what problem they're trying to solve, and make sure that you set up an environment in which you can get that clear and direct feedback.
Mm. And that's the key because the feedback is the only way to keep improving, and you're gonna be off initially.
You're always going to be off. You're always going to be off. Another funny example is we uh, we were talking. We're in this series of dinners, and I've heard it a couple times because we always talk about because I think like a CEO, right? So I'm like, hey, we can deliver AI translation for like half the cost and same quality. And I thought, wow, that's a great message. Everyone would want to hear that message, right? The reality is, and I heard this a couple times, and we heard this in the dinners. They're like, time out, time out. I don't want to hear about less cost because I operate on a budget. I don't want to give away half my budget. I'm like, oh, yeah. So we're like changing messaging to get 8x the content, same budget, right? It's like translate 10 times more. You know what I mean? In half the time. Like point is like that's the message that resonates. And I was thinking like a CEO, not like a person that's trying to get their job done where like I've got all this content, it's coming, it's I'm getting more and more content, it's growing exponentially, and I have to reduce my turnaround time because it's taking me 2 weeks to get a translation. That's the problem they were trying to solve, not trying to do it for 40% less.
Just to go back to WHI for a second, was there an uncommon insight that you realized on that journey to product market fit?
Sure that we kept that very tight connection between the customer and what job they were trying to do and the development cycle that we had. And it's funny because like things can like this like without that North Star, you always kind of hear about this terminology, the North Star. It is a true thing. I think the hard thing about when we talk about if you're familiar with you know, like if you've listened to enough product teams, they're always talking about a North Star, right? Right? Unless that is specific and in line with the customer problem and measurable, in my opinion, I think it gets tough because it's like kind of like this idea that doesn't always get translated into great product.
Hmm. Interesting. I would love to hear more about that. And
So
yeah.
I'll give you an example. So at eBay, we were obsessed with speed and we were obsessed with shopping cart abandonment, right? Kind of things, right? And the reason for speed was because, organic traffic was there's two things. We could directly attribute conversion rate improvement to speed. So if the speed was low on a page, we could see the conversion rate actually dip down. So we knew that the faster we could make the experience, the higher the conversion rate we would have, right? So that was a direct correlation to revenue generation. So we obsessively tracked every page speed, every step in the checkout, the purchase experience, working just like let's grind it down, because that would result in real revenue. Sort of my point is like that was a KPI that we could measure and align against very specifically, and we could predict the outcome of making those improvements.
The vision might not have a clear articulative measurement, right? Like that level of statement, but then the North Star has to. Is that what you're saying?
Mission was to, I don't remember what it was, but you like have the world's largest marketplace, find everything you need, da
Yeah.
da da da, da, right? Easy peasy, right? But then there had to be some pillars, and there are pillars within that. Okay, what does that mean specifically? Having the world's greatest marketplace, right? Okay, what does that mean? Selection, right? Really important. That's a KPI. That's a goal we can have. That's a KPI we can measure. And we spent a lot of time thinking about. This is one of the things I learned at eBay, and very particularly, I could see a direct correlation between inventory available or selection count and GMV, right? For every item that I added, I could expect X dollars a year from that. So we created all kinds of programs around driving that selection up. That was a key pillar, right? Speed, right? Affected SEO, it affected conversion rate, all those things. So we spent a lot of time thinking about how do I improve the speed of this process, all of that. So that's where my point is like, even if you have a big sort of like mission statement, that mission statement needs to be broken down into pillars or attributes that you can measure specifically against, and then make sure that your product roadmap does that. One of the most important things that I've learned how to do or developed or really focused on is operating cadence. In other
Mm.
words, what does that mean? That means it's not enough to have like an idea. It's about how disciplined are we about executing against the idea or a set of ideas and KPIs over time. And so I've kind of developed this operating cadence that it's a little bit of a grind. I'm not gonna I'm not gonna sugarcoat it, but it's kind of like if you're training for like if you're an athlete, right, at all, like that 90% of what you do is about, that grind getting to that event, right? It's not the event itself. And so I think a lot of that in business is just that discipline of executing every day against your operating plan, making sure, okay, these are the 10 things, these are the 5 things that we're doing. That's it, no more, no less. We might do other things, but we're not going to talk about them day in, day out. And we have an operating stand-up every day that focuses on those things. And so I know that those things are going to get done on time, and those are going to be the things that are going to move the needle.
Yeah. Well, in this new world, how often does that plan change throughout the year?
Do you want a BS answer or you want me to? Yeah, it's probably um, and this is where I have to check myself because like I do try not to change it, but it does change. It does change. We were just having this conversation this morning about it's June. We're halfway through the year, and the goalposts have shifted.
Yeah.
So we have to adjust. So I do think that you do have to be iterative, but you can't whipsaw the team either. I think that's the balance and that's the art and the experience of it.
And I think that this point that we're hitting on right now is one of the biggest things because it's like, how do you make the decision when it's outside of the framework that you've kind of articulated, like on your journey to product market fit? Because you're hearing one thing and it's just like, whoa, the feedback is pulling in this other direction, and that might mean that the North Star would change slightly. And it feels like when you set the North Star or when you set the metrics, you're like, there's no way we're changing. This is what we're doing. Keep going. So I'm curious, like, I'd love to hear more of your perspective on like how you make those like out of framework decisions.
I try and keep the framework for the operating plan the same for the year. So our budget, our forecast, those are kind of sacrosanct, right? Like we gotta make
Yeah.
those happen. The operating plan itself, like the main pillars, right, are the same. What might move around a little bit are where we focus our attention on the individual projects. Let's call them that.
Mm,
One of the mistakes that companies make too is like they're like, hey, we said this is our plan. This is what we're going to do. Well, you might be running up against a brick wall and you keep kind of like repeating that thing and failing at it because you didn't iterate. And so I do believe that you got to get out there and build, test, iterate, and adjust based on the feedback that you get. It might not be the feedback you want, and you may end up like left of center of where you expect, or right of center where you expect it to be. But kind of the other expression is like, I don't want to be pushing a wet noodle up a hill, right? You gotta be feeling that like you're skiing down here. You gotta feel some momentum. If you don't feel momentum, you're probably in the wrong place.
last question is like, what's the biggest piece of advice that you'd have to an early stage founder from all your experience?
It's easy. It's focusing on, obsessing over the customer's job to get done.
Yeah.
Just and I think that, and to that, I would also add the corollary, and it's got to, whatever you're doing has got to be a step change. Like, especially if you're a founder, like making a marginal improvement over that job is probably not going to get them, it's not going to be enough to get them to move off the incumbent solution. Yeah, I've seen this too often where you come in with an idea. It's a great idea, it's a better idea, but it's just not enough to overcome inertia. But I think I'll add one more corollary, which is you got to be first-ish too,
Yeah.
right? So think about that. So it's got to, pay attention to that, the job that your customer's trying to get done.
Yeah.
You got to solve it, step change better, and you kind of got to be like one of the first. Otherwise, it's just going to be so expensive to try and break through. It's to your point. It's like, okay, I'm already used to using GPT. They'll do 10 billion. What are they going to do? 10 billion in revenue
Yeah.
this year? Something like that.
I
Um,
saw that they're already at 5. Yeah.
hey, great. I just rolled out another AI solution. Who cares? So, yeah, so I think you got to be effective and you got to be one of the first.
I love that. You said first-ish. I think
Yeah,
that's
first
great.
is. I don't think you don't have to be necessarily the first, but you have to be one of the first, in my opinion.
100%. There's a sweet spot of like breakthrough time
Yeah.
that has to happen. And Brian, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your story.
No, my pleasure. It was great talking with you, Adam.
Reach out to me on LinkedIn, Adam O'Donnell. Go to thefounderinitiative.com or the Founder Initiative on YouTube. This is about helping founders hit product market fit, get funded, and stay up to date. Boom.